Welcome to the chosen one. Did they throw dirt on your dreams while you were still breathing? Did they write your eulogy while your heart was still beating? Did they celebrate your funeral while you were standing right there watching? Listen to me. Picture this. A courtroom in heaven. Your enemies have already signed the paperwork on your downfall. The verdict's been read. The case is closed. But just before the gavel could hit, the judge of judges reaches across eternity, tears that file in half, and declares with the voice that spoke galaxies into existence, "Case dismissed. This one's mine." They stood over your life like it was a gravesite, throwing handfuls of gossip like dirt on a coffin. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't see, is that God wasn't writing your last chapter. He was writing your first. See, there's something they don't teach you in Sunday school about divine timing. Sometimes God lets them think they won. Sometimes He lets them celebrate. Sometimes He lets them get comfortable in their lies, because He's about to flip the script so hard, it'll make their heads spin. If you've ever been written off, if you've ever had people literally clap when you fell, if they've ever counted you out like you were already 6 feet under, drop "not done" in the comments right now. Let the whole world know this is your resurrection hour. Now, I want to thank every single one of you who has supported this message through Super Thanks. Your generosity means more than you know. You're not just donating, you're helping spread light to others who feel alone in their calling. Whether you give or not, I'm deeply grateful for your presence here. Your support, your time, your attention, it all matters. And if this message resonates with your soul, go ahead and let that blessing flow. But here's what I need you to understand. There's a reason they came for you so hard. There's a reason the attacks felt personal. There's a reason they couldn't just leave you alone. And I'm about to tell you why before this message ends. When you hear it, when you really hear it, it's going to flip your whole story upside down. Because what if I told you that everything they did to destroy you was actually God's way of positioning you? What if their betrayal was your promotion? What if their rejection was your divine selection? Don't you dare scroll past this. Don't you dare close this video, because the same hands that closed the casket on your dreams are about to watch God crack it wide open. Your enemies thought they were burying you, but God was planting you. And, baby, it's harvest time. Do you remember the exact moment they decided you were finished? Can you still feel the cold stare when they looked right through you like you were already gone? How does it feel to know they threw a party while you were still breathing? Let me paint you a picture that's gonna cut deep. They gathered around your life like vultures at a roadside feast. They whispered in hallways, sent messages behind closed doors, made phone calls where your name was passed around like a death certificate. They didn't just abandon you. They celebrated your collapse. And you know what hurt the most? Some of them were family. Some of them sat at your dinner table. Some of them knew your middle name, your favorite song, the way you take your coffee. But when the world turned against you, they didn't just stay silent. They grabbed shovels. I'm talking to you, chosen one. The one who's been written off more times than you can count. The one who's watched people you loved become people you don't recognize. You've lived long enough to see friendships die, marriages crumble, children walk away, and colleagues smile while they undermined everything you built. See, this hits different when you're older, doesn't it? When you're young, betrayal stings. But when you've got decades of scars, when you've already buried dreams you thought would never die, when you've seen promises turn to dust, that betrayal doesn't just hurt. It echoes through every broken place you thought had healed. You remember that job you poured your heart into for 20 years? The one where they threw you a going-away party after they forced you out? You remember that friend who knew all your secrets? The one who used them as weapons the moment you weren't useful anymore? You remember that family member who turned everyone against you with lies so smooth, even you started believing them. They stood around your reputation like it was a corpse laid out for viewing. They spoke about you in past tense while you were still fighting for your future. They divided up your influence, your connections, your legacy like you were already 6 feet under. But here's what they didn't know. Here's what they couldn't see with their limited earthly vision. What looked like your funeral was actually your incubation. You see, the same God who let them think they buried you was the same God writing resurrection on the walls of eternity. Every shovel of dirt they threw was actually a covering. Every lie they spread was actually protection. Every door they slammed was actually God redirecting your steps toward something they could never touch. Job lost everything in one day. Everything. His children, his wealth, his health, his reputation. Even his wife told him to curse God and die. But what Satan meant for destruction, God used for demonstration. What looked like Job's ending became his greatest beginning. Daniel got thrown into a den of lions because jealous men couldn't stand his favor with the king. They thought they were watching his execution. Instead, they witnessed his elevation. The very pit they dug became the platform for his promotion. And you, sweet, weary, battle-scarred warrior, they thought they were planning your funeral, but God was planning your resurrection. Every tear you cried in that empty house wasn't wasted water. It was seed money for a harvest they'll never understand. Every night you lay awake wondering why, that wasn't torment. That was transformation happening in the dark places where miracles are born. They celebrated too early. They popped champagne over a grave that was actually a garden. They threw dirt on dreams that were actually dormant, not dead. Because the God who resurrects the dead doesn't need your permission to flip the script. You've been in that tomb long enough. You've been wrapped in their lies, suffocated by their rejection, buried under their betrayal. But tombs aren't permanent addresses for the chosen. They're just temporary holding patterns before the comeback. The same people who wrote your obituary are about to read your testimony. The same mouths that pronounced you dead are about to witness your resurrection. The same hands that closed the casket on your dreams are about to watch God crack it wide open with the force of divine vindication. You think you've been forgotten, but you've been fermenting. You think you've been rejected, but you've been selected. You think you've been buried, but you've been planted. Because here's what 30, 40, 50, 60 years of life teaches you that the young ones don't understand yet. God's delays aren't his denials. His silence isn't his absence, and his allowance of your pain isn't his abandonment of your purpose. They thought your chapter was over, but God's been writing the plot twist this whole time. They planned your funeral, but heaven's been preparing your festival. They dug your grave, but the Almighty's been watering your garden. Don't scroll away from this truth. Don't minimize this moment, because the same hands that closed the casket on your dreams are about to watch God open it with such force that the whole world will know. You were never finished. You were just getting started. And what's coming next is going to prove that their celebration was premature and their declarations were powerless against a God who specializes in resurrections. The question isn't whether you'll rise, it's whether they'll be able to handle the light when you do. But here's where the story gets wild, chosen one. Here's where heaven starts playing chess while earth is still playing checkers. You see, what looked like your ending, what felt like your final chapter, what had everyone writing your obituary and planning your memorial service, that wasn't God hitting the pause button on your life. That was God hitting the record button on theirs. Every betrayal was being documented. Every lie was being catalogued. Every scheme was being screenshot in the courts of heaven. While they thought they were writing your exit, God was compiling their indictment. You want to know something that'll shake you to your core? The same pit they dug for you, the same trap they set, the same grave they measured. God turned it into their own prison. Because when you mess with someone heaven has marked, you don't just fight that person, you fight the one who marked them. Think about Joseph for a minute. This man had dreams that shook his family, had visions that made his brothers sick with envy. And what did they do? They sold him into slavery, told their father he was dead, threw a bloody coat at an old man's feet and said, "Your boy's gone." But here's what they didn't know. Every step down into that pit, every mile toward that slave market, every chain they put on his wrists, was actually God positioning his chess piece. Because 20 years later, when famine hit and their bellies were empty and their pride was broken, they had to bow before the same brother they buried. The narrative flipped so hard it gave them whiplash. And Daniel, thrown into a lion's den because he wouldn't bow to a golden statue. The king sealed that den with his own ring. The death warrant was signed. The executioners went home satisfied. But when morning came and they rolled that stone away, Daniel walked out without a scratch, and the lions looked like they'd been fed steak all night. Do you see what God was doing? He wasn't just saving Daniel. He was making a statement to every kingdom, every ruler, every enemy that thinks they can touch what belongs to him. But here's the question that's going to unlock everything for you. Are you ready? Do you know why God didn't rescue you sooner? Do you know why he let you sit in that prison season? Why he let you marinate in that wilderness? Why he allowed you to walk through that valley where your own voice echoed back at you? Stay with me, because this will explain everything. God wasn't late. God was loading the weapon that your enemies just handed him. See, when they came for you, when they plotted against you, when they spread those lies and built those coalitions and turned people against you, they thought they were attacking you. But what they were really doing was attacking God's property. And when you attack God's property, you don't just get evicted, you get foreclosed. Every whisper campaign they started became evidence in heaven's courtroom. Every door they tried to close became a door God marked to blow off the hinges later. Every reputation they tried to destroy became a testimony he was preparing to magnify. You thought you were the victim, but you were actually the undercover operation. God let them reveal their true nature. He let them show their cards. He let them expose their motives and their methods and their malice. Because you can't prosecute what you can't prove, and God needed evidence. And baby, did they give him evidence? While you were crying in your prayer closet, God was taking notes. While you were wondering why he was silent, he was building a case. While you were feeling forgotten, he was setting up the greatest comeback in your family's history. Because here's what happens when heaven flips the board. The pawns become queens, the outcasts become kings, the rejected become the selected. And everyone who counted you out has to watch you count your blessings. But this isn't just about vindication. This is about demonstration. God doesn't just want to restore you. He wants to use your restoration to terrorize every demon that thought they could touch his anointed and get away with it. Your comeback isn't just personal, it's prophetic. Every person who wrote you off is about to get a front row seat to watch God rewrite the script. Every mouth that buried you is about to announce your resurrection. Every hand that pushed you down is about to applaud your elevation. The chessboard just flipped, chosen one. And guess what? You're not the piece being moved anymore. You're the player God's been training all along. The master player just made his move, and checkmate is inevitable. But the real question isn't whether you're going to win. The real question is, are you ready for what happens when the whole world sees that God never stopped fighting for you? You know what nobody talks about? The years that feel like death, but aren't. The seasons where you're breathing but not living. Where you wake up every morning and ask God, "Did you forget about me?" I'm talking about those silent decades, those invisible years where it feels like the whole world moved on without you, where your phone stopped ringing, where invitations dried up, where opportunities that once knocked on your door now walk right past like you don't even exist. Maybe it was after the divorce papers were signed and suddenly you were starting over at 55. Maybe it was when the company you gave 30 years to handed you a pink slip and a half-hearted handshake. Maybe it was when the children you raised flew away and left you staring at empty rooms, wondering if your purpose died with their childhood. Listen to me, chosen one. What if I told you that those weren't your wasted years? What if I told you that God wasn't ignoring you? He was incubating you. See, there's something beautiful and terrible about winter that most people miss. Above ground, everything looks dead. The trees stand naked. The earth looks barren. Nothing's moving. Nothing's growing. But underground, oh, underground is where the real miracle happens. While the world sleeps, roots spread deeper. While everything appears lifeless, life is actually preparing for the most explosive growth it's ever known. The deeper the winter, the stronger the spring. Psalm 1-3 says you'll be like a tree planted by rivers of water that brings forth its fruit in its season. Notice it doesn't say if your season comes. It says when your season comes. Because seasons don't skip the faithful. They just come in God's timing, not yours. But here's what breaks my heart. While God was developing your root system, strengthening your foundation, preparing you for a harvest you couldn't even imagine, you thought He had forgotten you. You thought you were being punished. You thought maybe you weren't chosen after all. How many nights did you cry yourself to sleep, feeling invisible? How many mornings did you wake up feeling like yesterday's news? How many times did you watch other people get promoted, celebrated, recognized, while you sat in the shadows wondering what you did wrong? Nothing. You did nothing wrong. God wasn't punishing you. He was protecting you. He wasn't ignoring you. He was preparing you. He wasn't withholding from you. He was working for you. Let me tell you about Martha. 72 years old, widow for 8 years. Her children lived across the country. Her friends had either moved to Florida or moved to glory. She felt forgotten, useless, like her best days were behind her. For 3 years, Martha's life looked like winter. She volunteered at the food bank twice a week, but even that felt routine. She prayed, but heaven felt silent. She read her Bible, but the words felt distant. She was alive, but she wasn't living. Then, one Tuesday morning, something shifted. A young mother at the food bank broke down crying. Her husband had left. She had 3 kids and nowhere to go. And Martha didn't just hand her a bag of groceries. She opened her home. She opened her heart. She opened her life. Within 6 months, Martha's house became a safe haven for abandoned women and children. Within a year, she was running the most successful transitional housing program in the county. By year 2, she was speaking at conferences, training other volunteers, writing grants that brought in hundreds of thousands of dollars. At 75, Martha was more alive than she'd ever been. The skills she'd learned, raising her own children, the wisdom she'd gained through her own pain, the patience she'd developed in those quiet years. Everything she thought was waste became the very foundation of her miracle. But here's the key. None of that could have happened at 65. She needed those 8 years of silence to develop the spiritual muscles she'd need for the weight of her calling. God didn't pause Martha's life. He pressed slow cook on her anointing. And that's exactly what He did with you. Those years you felt forgotten, God was downloading wisdom into your spirit. Those nights you felt alone, God was teaching you to hear His voice above the noise. Those seasons when nothing made sense, God was developing your discernment, so you'd never be fooled again. You see, the enemy wants you to believe that isolation equals abandonment. That quiet means God is quiet. That stillness means stagnation. But chosen one, sometimes God takes you underground not to bury you, but to plant you. Moses had 40 years in the wilderness before he led a nation. Joseph had years in prison before he ruled Egypt. David spent years in caves before he sat on a throne. Jesus himself had 30 years of silence before 3 years of ministry. What makes you think your timeline would be different? The problem is, we live in a microwave society that's forgotten the power of the slow cooker. We want instant breakthrough, fast-track miracles, overnight success. But the greatest moves of God aren't microwaved. They're slow-cooked, marinated in prayer, seasoned with suffering, tenderized by time. Every year you thought was wasted was actually building something inside you that couldn't be built any other way. Every betrayal was developing your discernment. Every rejection was strengthening your resolve. Every closed door was redirecting your steps toward the right door. And while you were growing underground, invisible to everyone else, God was removing obstacles from your path that you didn't even know existed. He was positioning people who would become your supporters. He was preparing opportunities that would be too big for the old version of you to handle. Because here's what they don't understand about God's timing. He doesn't just give you what you're ready for, He prepares you for what He's already planned to give you. That calling you've been carrying, it needed you to be this age, this wise, this seasoned. That ministry you've been dreaming about, it required this level of brokenness, this depth of compassion. That platform you've been praying for, it demanded this much character, this much integrity. You couldn't have handled at 40 what God is about to give you at 60. You couldn't have stewarded at 30 what He's positioning you to steward at 70. But I need you to understand something. Your winter season is about to break. The roots you've been growing in secret are about to bear fruit in public. The foundation you've been building in silence is about to support a structure that will shock everyone who counted you out. Can you feel it? That stirring in your spirit, that restlessness in your bones, that sense that something is shifting in the atmosphere around your life. That's not wishful thinking. That's prophetic anticipation. That's your spirit recognizing that the season they couldn't see is about to become the season they can't ignore. Now let me tell you something that's going to shake every hater to their core. Every person who whispered behind your back, every family member who counted you out, every so-called friend who threw dirt on your name while you were down, they're about to get a reality check that'll knock them clean off their high horse. You see, they tried to build a case against you, didn't they? Oh, they had their evidence table all laid out. They had witnesses lined up around the block, ready to testify about your failures. They had exhibits A through Z documenting every mistake you ever made. They thought they had an airtight case for your destruction. But here's what they didn't count on. Here's what they never saw coming. You're still here. That's right. While they were busy playing prosecutor, judge, and jury over your life, God was sitting in the Supreme Court of Heaven, laughing at their little kangaroo court. Because the most powerful evidence in any courtroom isn't what people say about you, it's what's standing right there in front of them. Your survival itself is Exhibit A that their case was built on lies. Think about it. If you were really as worthless as they claimed, if you were really as finished as they declared, if you were really as hopeless as they painted you to be, then why are you still breathing? Why is your heart still beating? Why are you still standing when their predictions said you should have crumbled years ago? Every morning you wake up is another piece of evidence that their testimony was false. Every step you take forward is another witness for the defense. Every breath in your lungs is proof positive that their verdict was overruled by a higher court. And, oh, how it burns them up inside. You want to know why they're still watching your every move, why they're still checking your social media, why your name still comes up in their conversations. Because your very existence is driving them absolutely crazy. They can't understand how someone they declared dead and buried is still walking around, still glowing, still growing. They're like the Pharisees standing outside Lazarus's tomb, scratching their heads, trying to figure out how a dead man is having dinner with Jesus. The evidence is right there in front of their faces, but their pride won't let them admit they were wrong. Listen to me carefully. When Jesus rose from the dead, the religious leaders didn't celebrate the miracle. They tried to cover it up. They paid the guards to lie about what they witnessed. They spread false stories to discredit the resurrection. Why? Because resurrection is the kind of evidence you can't argue with. It's the kind of proof that shuts every mouth and stops every tongue. And, baby, your resurrection from the ashes of their attacks is the same kind of undeniable evidence. Matthew 12:36 says, "But I tell you that everyone will have to give account on the day of judgment for every empty word they have spoken, every lie they told about you, every false witness they bore against your character, every empty word they spoke over your destiny. It's all being documented in heaven's court records." But here's the beautiful part. While they were busy building their case for your destruction, God was building his case for your vindication. Every tear you cried in secret became evidence of your faithfulness. Every prayer you whispered in the dark became testimony of your trust. Every time you chose forgiveness over bitterness became proof of your character. The prophet Isaiah said it best, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue which rises against you in judgment you shall condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord." That word condemn doesn't mean you're sitting around plotting revenge. It means their own words will expose them as false witnesses. You don't even have to defend yourself anymore. Your life is doing the talking. Your peace in the storm is speaking volumes. Your joy in the midst of their chaos is testimony that their predictions were powerless. And let me tell you what really gets under their skin. It's not just that you survived, it's how you survived. You didn't survive bitter. You didn't survive broken. You didn't survive begging for their approval. You survived blessed. You survived whole. You survived with your dignity intact and your faith stronger than ever. That's the kind of evidence that makes devils tremble and haters lose sleep at night. If this is hitting your spirit right now, if you can feel the truth of this resonating in your bones, type evidence in the comments. This isn't just about your story. This is about showing the world what God can do with what's left when everyone else gives up on you. Because here's what I need you to understand. Your comeback isn't just personal vindication. It's prophetic demonstration. There are people watching your resurrection who need to see that God still specializes in impossible cases. There are folks who've been written off, counted out, and left for dead who need to witness that the obituaries written by men don't override the life certificates signed by heaven. Your survival is becoming their salvation. Your testimony is becoming their hope. Your evidence is becoming their encouragement. But the devil doesn't want this evidence to go public. He doesn't want your resurrection to inspire others to believe for their own. That's why the attacks intensify when you start glowing again. That's why the lies get louder when your light gets brighter. Because your proof is dangerous to his kingdom of lies. So they'll try to discredit the evidence. They'll say it's not real. They'll claim it's temporary. They'll predict you'll fall again. But Romans 8:31 settles it once and for all. If God is for us, who can be against us? The evidence is in. The verdict is clear. The case is closed. And no appeal from hell can overturn what heaven has already decided about your destiny. The same God who rolled away the stone from Jesus' tomb is about to roll away every stone they tried to bury you under. The same power that raised Christ from the dead is about to raise your dreams, your purpose, your joy, and your testimony from the graveyard of their lies. And when that happens, when the full evidence of God's favor on your life comes to light, they're going to realize they weren't just fighting you. They were fighting the one who said, "Touch not my anointed, and do my prophets no harm." The question isn't whether God can vindicate you. The question is, are you ready for the shock waves that are about to hit when he does? You know what's wild about your story? What's absolutely mind-blowing? Even the devil himself had to become your bodyguard. Yeah, you heard me right. The same enemy that came to steal, kill, and destroy had to protect you for God's sake. Let me paint you a picture that'll shake your theology loose. There's an invisible sign hanging over your life in the spirit realm. It's written in the blood of Jesus, stamped with the authority of heaven, and it reads, "Do not touch, property of the Most High." And every demon, every principality, every force of darkness that came swinging at you had to pull back at the last second. Not because they wanted to, but because they had to. Remember that car accident that should have taken you out? The doctor said you should have died. The paramedic said it was impossible you survived. But you walked away with barely a scratch. That wasn't luck, beloved. That was a verdict from heaven's supreme court. It got close, but it couldn't cross the line. Remember that diagnosis they gave you? The one where they told your family to prepare for the worst. You were supposed to be a statistic. You were supposed to be another casualty. But here you are, years later, still breathing, still fighting, still standing. It got close, but it couldn't cross the line. What about that financial collapse that should have destroyed everything you built? The lawyers said bankruptcy was inevitable. The accountants said there was no way out. But somehow, some way, provision showed up at the 11th hour. Money appeared from places you never expected. It got close, but it couldn't cross the line. You think that's coincidence? You think that's just good timing? Baby, let me tell you something that'll rearrange your understanding of divine protection. When God marks you as chosen, he doesn't just give you a guardian angel, he gives you a battalion. He doesn't just put a hedge around you. He builds a fortress that hell itself can't penetrate. Job 1:10 says, "Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has?" But here's what most people miss. That hedge isn't just defense, it's a declaration. It's God saying to every force of evil, "This one belongs to me, and if you so much as breathe in their direction, you'll answer to me." Think about every close call you've had, every moment when disaster was inches away from your door, that house fire that stopped 3 doors down from yours, that layoff that hit every department except the one you worked in, that storm that devastated everything around you but somehow missed your street. You called it luck. God called it jurisdiction. But here's where it gets supernatural. Here's where your story becomes evidence that you're not just another believer wandering through life hoping for the best. You're marked. You're sealed. You're protected by a covenant that predates your birth and will outlast your final breath. Daniel 6:22. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. The same God who shut lions' mouths for Daniel has been shutting the mouths of every beast that roared against you. The same power that protected Daniel in the den has been protecting you in every valley you've walked through. Every person who came against you with evil intent. Where are they now? That boss who tried to ruin your career. That family member who spread lies about your character. That friend who betrayed your trust. Look around. They're either gone, exposed, or dealing with their own consequences. And you? You're still here, still standing, still chosen. It got close, but it couldn't cross the line. See, what your enemies didn't understand is that attacking you wasn't just attacking a person, they were attacking heaven's investment. They were touching the apple of God's eye. And Zechariah 2:8 warns us what happens to those who do. Whoever touches you touches the apple of his eye. You want to know why that relationship that was destroying your peace suddenly ended? Why that toxic situation just dissolved? Why doors that were locked against you suddenly swung wide open? Because there's a limit to how close chaos can get to a child of the King. But here's what'll blow your mind. Here's what'll make you fall to your knees in worship. It wasn't just that God protected you from disaster. He protected you from yourself. How many times were you about to make a decision that would have derailed your destiny? How many times were you ready to say yes to something that would have led you straight into a trap? But something stopped you. A feeling in your gut. A word from a friend. A door that wouldn't open no matter how hard you pushed. You thought it was frustration. God called it intervention. Psalm 37:23 says, "The Lord makes firm the steps of the one who delights in him." Every step that felt uncertain, every path that seemed blocked, every direction that felt wrong, God was making your steps firm by keeping you from taking the wrong ones. Even when you were walking in disobedience, even when you were running from your calling, even when you were making choices that should have destroyed you, there was a limit to how far you could fall. Because once God chooses you, that choice isn't dependent on your performance. It's anchored in His purpose. You've been living under supernatural protection your entire life and didn't even know it. Every breath you've taken, every morning you've awakened, every victory you've experienced, it's all been happening inside the boundaries of divine protection that hell itself has to respect. Romans 8:28 promises that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to His purpose. Even your mistakes, even your failures, even your worst decisions, they all had to bow to the will of God for your life. That's why every weapon formed against you has failed. Not because you're strong enough to defeat them, but because Isaiah 54:17 declares, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper." It's not a suggestion, it's a divine decree. So when you look back at your life, when you count the close calls and the narrow escapes, when you remember the times you should have been destroyed but somehow came out stronger, don't you dare call it luck. Don't you dare minimize it as coincidence. Call it what it is, a verdict from heaven that says you're untouchable, you're protected, you're chosen, and your story isn't over until God says it's over. But if hell had to stand down for your protection, if even your enemies became unwilling guardians of your destiny, what do you think God is preparing you for? What kind of purpose requires that level of supernatural security? What kind of calling demands that much divine intervention? The answer to that question is about to change everything you thought you knew about your future. You know what they say about resurrection morning? The tomb was empty, but the shock on their faces, that was full. And beloved, your resurrection morning is coming. But this time, you're not the one crawling back begging for acceptance. This time, they are. Picture this. You walk into that room again, the same room where they whispered about your failures, the same space where they divided up your influence like vultures picking at bones. But now, there's something different in the air, something they can't explain, something that makes their confident smirks melt into confusion. You see it in their eyes first, that flicker of recognition mixed with disbelief. Wait, isn't that the one we buried? Their mouths hang open like they've seen a ghost. And in a way, they have. Because the person standing before them isn't the broken soul they left for dead. This is someone who's been through the fire and came out pure gold. Listen to me, dear one, especially you who've lived decades on this earth. You who've been told your best years are behind you. You who've been pushed aside like yesterday's newspaper. God has a different timeline than this world's retirement plans. While they were planning your farewell party, heaven was planning your comeback tour. The Bible tells us in Ecclesiastes 3:1, "To everything there is a season." But here's what the enemy doesn't want you to know. Your season of purpose doesn't end at 65 or 70 or 80. Moses was 80 when God called him to lead Israel out of Egypt. Sarah was 90 when she gave birth to promise. Caleb was 85 when he said, "Give me this mountain." Your age isn't your expiration date. It's your authentication stamp. But here's the part that's going to blow your mind. Are you ready for this? The same mouths that buried you will be the ones announcing your return. And I'm about to tell you why. See, when God vindicates his chosen ones, he doesn't do it in a corner. He doesn't whisper your victory. He makes it so loud, so undeniable, so shocking that even your enemies become your unwilling PR team. They can't help but talk about what they're witnessing. They can't help but spread the news of your impossible comeback. Remember how they treated David when he was just a shepherd boy? His own brothers mocked him. What are you doing here? Who's watching those few sheep? But when that same shepherd boy walked out of the valley with Goliath's head in his hand, guess who was suddenly singing his praises? The same brothers who told him to go home. That's the power of divine reversal, beloved. God doesn't just restore you. He restores you in such a dramatic fashion that your critics become your chroniclers. And for those of you who've been written off because of your age, listen carefully. This world worships youth, but heaven honors wisdom. This culture celebrates the new, but God perfects the seasoned. You're not over the hill. You're on top of the mountain with the clearest view you've ever had. I see you there, sitting in that chair, wondering if it's too late. Wondering if the dreams you buried are ever going to breathe again. Let me tell you something that'll shake you to your core. The graveyard of your disappointments is about to become a garden of testimonies, but here's what's going to shock them the most. When you return, you're not coming back desperate. You're not coming back needy. You're not coming back with your hat in your hand. You're coming back with authority they've never seen before. Because pressure doesn't just create diamonds, it creates unshakable confidence. They're going to see something in your eyes that wasn't there before. A knowing, a certainty, a peace that passes all understanding. And it's going to disturb their sleep, because they can't figure out how someone they broke is now more whole than they've ever been. You see, when God rebuilds you, he doesn't use the same blueprints. He upgrades the foundation. He reinforces the walls. He expands the capacity. What they're looking at isn't just the old you restored, it's the new you revealed. And here's the beautiful irony. While they were celebrating what they thought was your funeral, God was actually celebrating your graduation. You graduated from needing their approval. You graduated from fearing their opinions. You graduated from the prison of their limitations. The shock in their eyes isn't just surprise, it's recognition. They're recognizing the very thing they tried to kill, your divine calling. They're seeing the very thing they mocked, your God-given purpose. They're witnessing the very thing they denied, your unshakable identity. But here's what I need you to understand, precious one. Your return isn't about revenge, it's about revelation. It's not about making them pay. It's about making them see. When God vindicates you, it's not just for your sake, it's for theirs too. Because sometimes the only way to wake people up is to show them what they almost destroyed. Jeremiah 29:11 reminds us, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you hope and a future." Notice, it doesn't say plans I had for you, present tense, active plans, current blueprints. Your future is still being written. And those plans? They're not plan B because plan A failed. These are the plans. What looks like a comeback to them is actually you arriving right on schedule. You weren't late. You were incubating. You weren't lost. You were being found. You weren't forgotten. You were being prepared. The earthquake that shook your life wasn't destruction. It was excavation. God was digging up space for something bigger than what was there before. And now, when you step into that new space, when you occupy that expanded territory, when you walk in that amplified authority, they're going to understand something they missed the first time. You were never the problem. You were the solution they weren't ready for. So when you see that shock in their eyes, don't apologize for it. Don't minimize it. Don't try to make them comfortable with your transformation. Let them be shocked. Let them be speechless. Let them wrestle with the reality that what they thought was your ending was actually your beginning. Because, beloved, if God can split the Red Sea, He can split the lies they told about you. If He can make the sun stand still for Joshua, He can make time stand still for your vindication. If He can raise Lazarus from a 4-day grave, He can raise your dreams from a 40-year burial. Your return isn't just probable, it's prophetic. It's not just possible, it's promised. And the very people who wrote your obituary are about to witness your resurrection. But here's the question that's going to determine everything. Are you ready to shock them back? Are you ready to walk into your comeback season with the confidence of someone who knows they've been vindicated by the highest court? Because what God is about to do through you isn't just going to surprise them. It's going to rewrite everything they thought they knew about the power of divine timing. You know what they say about resurrection morning? The tomb was empty, but the shock on their faces, that was full. And beloved, your resurrection morning is coming. But this time, you're not the one crawling back begging for acceptance. This time, they are. Picture this. You walk into that room again, the same room where they whispered about your failures, the same space where they divided up your influence like vultures picking at bones. But now there's something different in the air, something they can't explain, something that makes their confident smirks melt into confusion. You see it in their eyes first, that flicker of recognition mixed with disbelief. Wait, isn't that the one we buried? Their mouths hang open like they've seen a ghost. And in a way, they have. Because the person standing before them isn't the broken soul they left for dead. This is someone who's been through the fire and came out pure gold. Listen to me, dear one, especially you who've lived decades on this earth. You who've been told your best years are behind you. You who've been pushed aside like yesterday's newspaper. God has a different timeline than this world's retirement plans. While they were planning your farewell party, heaven was planning your comeback tour. The Bible tells us in Ecclesiastes 3:1, to everything there is a season, but here's what the enemy doesn't want you to know. Your season of purpose doesn't end at 65 or 70 or 80. Moses was 80 when God called him to lead Israel out of Egypt. Sarah was 90 when she gave birth to promise. Caleb was 85 when he said, "Give me this mountain." Your age isn't your expiration date. It's your authentication stamp. But here's the part that's going to blow your mind. Are you ready for this? The same mouths that buried you will be the ones announcing your return. And I'm about to tell you why. See, when God vindicates His chosen ones, He doesn't do it in a corner. He doesn't whisper your victory. He makes it so loud, so undeniable, so shocking that even your enemies become your unwilling PR team. They can't help but talk about what they're witnessing. They can't help but spread the news of your impossible comeback. Remember how they treated David when he was just a shepherd boy. His own brothers mocked him. What are you doing here? Who's watching those few sheep? But when that same shepherd boy walked out of the valley with Goliath's head in his hand, guess who was suddenly singing his praises? The same brothers who told him to go home. That's the power of divine reversal, beloved. God doesn't just restore you. He restores you in such a dramatic fashion that your critics become your chroniclers. And for those of you who've been written off because of your age, Listen carefully. This world worships youth, but heaven honors wisdom. This culture celebrates the new, but God perfects the seasoned. You're not over the hill, you're on top of the mountain with the clearest view you've ever had. I see you there, sitting in that chair, wondering if it's too late, wondering if the dreams you buried are ever going to breathe again. Let me tell you something that'll shake you to your core. The graveyard of your disappointments is about to become a garden of testimonies. But here's what's going to shock them the most. When you return, you're not coming back desperate. You're not coming back needy. You're not coming back with your hat in your hand. You're coming back with authority they've never seen before. Because pressure doesn't just create diamonds, it creates unshakable confidence. They're going to see something in your eyes that wasn't there before, a knowing, a certainty, a peace that passes all understanding. And it's going to disturb their sleep because they can't figure out how someone they broke is now more whole than they've ever been. You see, when God rebuilds you, He doesn't use the same blueprints. He upgrades the foundation. He reinforces the walls. He expands the capacity. What they're looking at isn't just the old you restored, it's the new you revealed. And here's the beautiful irony. While they were celebrating what they thought was your funeral, God was actually celebrating your graduation. You graduated from needing their approval. You graduated from fearing their opinions. You graduated from the prison of their limitations. The shock in their eyes isn't just surprise, it's recognition. They're recognizing the very thing they tried to kill, your divine calling. They're seeing the very thing they mocked, your God-given purpose. They're witnessing the very thing they denied, your unshakable identity. But here's what I need you to understand, precious one. Your return isn't about revenge. It's about revelation. It's not about making them pay. It's about making them see. When God vindicates you, it's not just for your sake, it's for theirs too. Because sometimes the only way to wake people up is to show them what they almost destroyed. Jeremiah 29:11 reminds us, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you hope and a future." Notice, it doesn't say plans I had for you. Present tense, active plans, current blueprints. Your future is still being written. And those plans, they're not plan B because plan A failed. These are the plans. What looks like a comeback to them is actually you arriving right on schedule. You weren't late. You were incubating. You weren't lost. You were being found. You weren't forgotten. You were being prepared. The earthquake that shook your life wasn't destruction. It was excavation. God was digging up space for something bigger than what was there before. And now, when you step into that new space, when you occupy that expanded territory, when you walk in that amplified authority, they're going to understand something they missed the first time. You were never the problem. You were the solution they weren't ready for. So when you see that shock in their eyes, don't apologize for it. Don't minimize it. Don't try to make them comfortable with your transformation. Let them be shocked. Let them be speechless. Let them wrestle with the reality that what they thought was your ending was actually your beginning. Beloved, we've walked through this journey together, and I need you to remember 3 eternal truths that will anchor your soul when the storms try to shake you again. First, your story isn't over. What they called your ending was just God's comma. The dreams they buried, the purpose they mocked, the calling they tried to silence, none of it died. It was simply waiting for divine timing. Your resurrection isn't coming, dear one. It's already here. Second, their verdict was never the final verdict. When they wrote you off, when they counted you out, when they celebrated what they thought was your defeat, they were speaking from limited human perspective. But heaven's court operates on different principles. God's justice doesn't just restore, it multiplies. What the enemy meant for your destruction, God is turning into your greatest testimony. Third, you are marked, chosen, and protected by forces they cannot see or understand. Every attack that failed, every scheme that backfired, every plot that crumbled, that wasn't luck, beloved. That was divine intervention. You've been walking with invisible armor, covered by prayers you don't even know were prayed, shielded by a love that refuses to let you fall. And I want you to know tonight, you are not alone in this. Right now, as you're listening to these words, there are thousands of others just like you who have felt forgotten, overlooked, written off. But we are a community of the underestimated, a family of the resilient, a tribe of those who know that God's plans are always bigger than man's predictions. You don't have to carry this weight by yourself anymore. In the comments below, I want you to share one word, just one word, that describes what God is doing in your life right now. Whether it's healing, restoring, preparing, or surprising, let your voice join this chorus of resurrection testimonies. And when you see others sharing their words, pray for them, encourage them, remind them that their comeback is coming too. If this message has stirred something deep in your spirit, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they're not done yet. Share it with that friend who's been counting themselves out. Share it with that family member who thinks their best days are behind them. Sometimes God uses us to be the voice that reminds others of who they really are. And here's my challenge for you. Look at your life right now and ask yourself this question: if God is truly preparing you for something greater than what you lost, if He's positioning you for a comeback that will shock even your enemies, if He's writing a story of vindication that will become a testimony for generations, what would you do differently starting today? How would you walk? How would you pray? How would you hope? How would you prepare? Before you leave this sacred space we've created together, would you allow me to pray over you? I want to speak life over your situation, call forth what God is birthing in secret, and release heaven's blessing over your tomorrow. Father God, I come before your throne tonight carrying the hearts of every person who has stayed with us through this entire message. Lord, you see them right where they are, in their living rooms, in their bedrooms, maybe sitting in their cars listening to these words. You know their names, you know their pain, and you know their destiny. I pray right now for divine acceleration in their lives. Where the enemy has caused delays, release supernatural speed. Where others have created roadblocks, make highways in the desert. Where they've been told no, open doors that no man can shut. Father, I speak restoration over their reputation, their relationships, their resources, and their rest. What was stolen in darkness, return in broad daylight. What was taken by deception, restore with divine interest. Let their comeback be so undeniable, so powerful, so obviously orchestrated by you, that even their enemies will have to acknowledge your hand upon their lives. I pray for strength for the weary, hope for the discouraged, and fire for those who have been walking in lukewarm seasons. Reignite their passion, Lord. Remind them of their calling. Show them that their age is not their limitation, but their qualification. Their scars are not their shame, but their credentials. And Father, I pray that you would surround them with divine connections, people who will recognize their worth, celebrate their growth, and stand with them in their season of vindication. Remove every false friend, every energy vampire, every person who applauds their pain but resents their progress. Most of all, Lord, give them supernatural peace. The kind of peace that sleeps soundly while enemies plot. The kind of peace that smiles in the face of opposition. The kind of peace that knows, beyond any shadow of doubt, that what you have purposed for them will come to pass. I declare over each life represented here tonight, you are not forgotten, you are not finished, you are not forsaken. Your best days are not behind you, they are ahead of you. The same God who parted the Red Sea, who shut the lions' mouths, who raised the dead, is working on your behalf right now. In the mighty name of Jesus, I release this blessing, I seal this prayer, and I declare this word over every life. Your time is now, your season is here, and your story is just beginning. Amen and amen. Thank you for staying with me through this entire journey tonight. Your faithfulness to listen, to engage, to believe means more than you know. If this message has touched your heart, please subscribe to this channel and ring that notification bell. We're building a community of overcomers here, and your testimony could be the very thing that saves someone else's hope. Remember, beloved, they thought you were done, but God has other plans. And those plans are about to shock the world. Until we meet again, keep walking in your authority, keep believing in your comeback, and keep trusting in the God who never, ever gives up on his chosen ones. Grace and peace be with you. This is your resurrection hour.